All we've got to do now is to start pumping. What is going on, everybody? Welcome into the Fully Inflated Football Podcast. I am your host, Marcus Whitman, and we have a full show ahead. We're going to be recapping all of the games from Week 12. We're going to spend some more time on others than some. And then we are going to get into the Patreon mailbag. And we also have a guest for the show this week. We've got the Guilty as Charged podcast coming on. They are an awesome Chargers podcast. Got to be the best for that team. And I'm excited to have them on to the show. We're going to be talking about the huge upcoming game between Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert, the Bengals, and the Chargers. It's going to be a really fun chat with those guys. So excited for that. I'm actually going to lead the show with that. But before we hop into my interview with Alex and Steven from the Guilty as Charged podcast, I do want to let you guys know this show is brought to you by SeatGeek. SeatGeek is by far the best app for purchasing tickets for concerts, sporting events, obviously, as many of you guys are going to be going to. I have explored all of the other different ticketing apps. I have them all on my phone, but honestly, at this point, I should just get rid of all of them that aren't SeatGeek because I always find the best prices there. You get your tickets immediately. Some of the other ones, it takes like, half hour to get your tickets. And if you're buying like right before the game, like me and Anna had to wait using a different platform. We had to wait like 2 innings to get into the Twins game using a different app because we couldn't get our tickets in time. So SeatGeek is just by far the best, and I can't recommend it enough for you that are buying tickets for sporting events or concerts, whatever it may be. And the cream on top, or the cherry on top here, is you can support my channel in the process. So it's promo code FranchiseGuy on SeatGeek, no spaces, and you'll save $20 on already the best prices out there. So it's a win-win. Check it out if you're buying tickets. And also, this show is brought to you by my amazing supporters on Patreon. That is patreon.com/thatfranchiseguy, where you will not just support my channel, you will get exclusive content, things like my weekly NFL picks. We just got back to 500 on my against the spread picks this year, which has been a battle this season. With what a crazy NFL season this has been. But you also get film breakdowns. We did Dak Prescott last week. We're approaching draft season where you'll get exclusive draft content. And of course, you will support my channel in the process. And I kid you not, this channel would not exist without all of my amazing supporters on patreon.com/thatfranchiseguy. I would be working a different job, not making YouTube content, talking about football for a living without Patreon. So if you want to become a part of that and support my show, get exclusive content, head over to patreon.com/thatfranchiseguy. And I thank you from the bottom of my heart in advance. And with all of that said, thanks for letting me get the plugs out there. We are going to transition into my interview with the Guilty as Charged podcast. And then when that's done, we'll come back for the game wraps and the mailbag. So here we are with the Guilty as Charged podcast. I want to welcome Steven and Alex onto the podcast. Thank you guys so much for taking time out of your busy schedules. Everybody make sure you go check out the Guilty as Charged podcast. And how you guys doing out there? West Coast time, man. You're throwing off the normies out here with the late upload on this podcast tonight, but thanks for joining us regardless.
Yeah, well, we're actually on 2 different coasts. Alex is doing med school in the Caribbean, so he's actually 4 hours ahead of me. So it creates quite the challenge for the podcast time sometimes, especially, like when the Chargers were on Sunday Night Football, Alex was up until like 2:30, 3 in the morning recording with us. But yeah, man, happy to be here. Yeah, for sure. So this is a big week for Chargers for multiple reasons. Number one, you got just a big game with big playoff implications against the Bengals this week. So I want to talk a little bit about that. They're also coming off maybe their worst game of the year. I don't know, probably up there. And then it's also the big Burrow versus Herbert game. So I want to kind of just reflect upon all that and look forward a little bit. So first off, I want to ask you guys kind of, what do you think went wrong against the Broncos? Mainly offensively, but both sides of the ball, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, I think you could look at a lot of things. Really, the offense just, I felt like there was a point where they just got too methodical on certain drives. Herbert was not his best, obviously, throwing the interception to Surtain. Obviously, the other one that went to Surtain went off Beckler's hands, but he threw probably 5 more, interceptable passes that weren't caught. One that, went right through Justin Simmons' hands, unfortunately. So, wasn't the best day for him. And yeah, it felt like it was very hard to kind of just get moving. And, the problem with the defense right now, particularly their third down defense, is they're just kind of on the field for so long. And then the defense gets, weathered down because they can't defend the run. And frankly, in the last month, they haven't been that great defending the pass either. So then it just creates these situations where the offense has less time to work with, particularly in the first half against the Broncos. And, then the defense is just kind of gassed by the end of the game, which ends in that, I think it was Javonte Williams touchdown. And then, of course, they finished the game on the Surtain pick 6, really. So there's a lot of things, but I think some of the problems that they have now were evident in those first 5 weeks of the season where they were 4-1. But now I think they've really come out to, they don't really have the high end talent right now to overcome some of those problems because of all the injuries. The offensive line is now banged up. So I think it's really just kind of been a snowball effect these last 4 or 5 weeks, unfortunately.
Yeah. So just to kind of, jump on and add into that, I think, so the Chargers have 3 backups in along the offensive line on Sunday. And 2 of the players, obviously there's Pro Football Focus who charts pressures, right? I chart my own pressures. Senio Kelemete was the left guard who came in for Matt Filer. Matt Filer's been really, really good for the Chargers. He's not like an elite guard by any means, but he's an above average, respectable starter.
And yeah, I just threw my Pro Bowl vote in for Matt Filer, by the way, on the channel the other day.
Let's go. I love to see it.
Yeah.
I think like he's been a great addition. He's exceeded even my expectations, and I was really high on the signing. But Senio Kelemete, I charted him for 10 pressures allowed against the Broncos, and the Broncos weren't even, it wasn't like Derek Shelby and Draymond Jones were torching him. It was McTelvin Agim at number 95, who I don't even remember his own name. So Senio Kelemete had a rough game. Michael Schofield is the other guard who replaced Ode Abushi. He had a rough game. So, it just really compounded all the issues that they've had, because Alex mentions, there's such a rhythmic and methodical offense right now. But when you have such poor guard play, you can't get in that rhythm. And so it just felt like Herbert was forcing things. The offensive coordinator, Joe Lombardi, was forcing things. Everybody was just really on edge. And so because they are so methodical and because the defense can't get off the field on third downs, the margins on offense are so thin that when Justin Herbert's not playing at an MVP top 5 quarterback level, this is what you get. You get 13 points against the Broncos, who frankly are not that good of a defense.
Yeah. One thing that really, it was really actually 3 things that stood out to me from this game. Number 1 was just the run defense, which,
it's been a problem all year, man. It's been all year.
It felt like last year was a little better, but it feels like it's been a problem since, about 2015. But yeah, that was an obvious issue. And I think you look at this roster, it's just like, you might just have to live with that a little bit. I think they have struggled against those more run heavy teams. So that's obviously something they got to clean up in general, but the offense was just super frustrating. And I actually watched, and this will transition at some point well into a conversation about Burrow, but I just happened to watch back to back between Bengals, Steelers, and Chargers, Broncos. And it just hit me. I was like, the Chargers don't they don't set up the easy stuff. There's not, especially in this game, there's not a lot of screens. They weren't running the ball well. So it's basically either quick game with Herbert or, set up these beautiful, like outside the numbers, deep shots. And I know you guys are all very frustrated with your offensive coordinator. So for me, that feels like where they have a lot of room to improve is just integrating some of the more simple stuff to create more, third and shorts and easier stuff like that. And that really stood out in that Broncos game. And I guess my last question here is like, do you feel like the problems in that Broncos game are the things that have frustrated you consistently throughout the season, or are there other concerns on top of that? And to piggyback off of that, what has really impressed you this season from the Chargers that you maybe weren't expecting coming into the year?
Yeah, I think it's some of the things. Sorry, Alex. I think some of the same things that you're mentioning, though. Like, I'm not necessarily frustrated with Joe Lombardi. Like, we always get people in our chats every single day, like, we need to fire Joe Lombardi. Like, I'm not there. It's the first year that they're bringing this offense together, and they are doing a lot of good things when things are going right. It's just that for me, the most frustrating part of this coaching staff is that when things go to shit, they have no adjustments. There's no creative backup plan to like get things going. And so, you can listen to a bunch of different people talk about like the offensive line struggles and what to do with that. And whenever the offensive line is struggling, or whenever Herbert is struggling, the answer is always, okay, I'm going to go back to the Drew Brees quick passing game because that's what I know best. Like, that's what Joe Lombardi is most comfortable with. When the offense is doing really well, like, you see a lot of creative RPO passing concepts. You see a lot of end arounds. You see a good amount of downfield drive concepts that are really fun to watch. But when things are not going well, it's okay, here's, this slant out concept for the 17th time today. So that to me is like the frustrating part. When they're in rhythm, like if you go back and watch the Eagles game and you watch the Eagles tape, the offense looked awesome, like from snap to finish of the game. Same thing with the Steelers. But then you click on the Patriots tape and you click on the Broncos tape, and you're just like, this offense is incredibly boring. There's no innovation. There's no creativity to make things easier for the offensive line. And so that really has been my biggest thing with this coaching staff. I mean, they're all relatively young. It's the first year together, but they cannot problem solve in a game to save their lives.
Yeah, I think that's pretty evident. Was there? Yeah, no, go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, kind of following up that point, when we talk about sort of the things that we don't like about this offense, I think it's that sort of everything does require timing, right? Like, there are a lot of like slant routes, and I think something that compounds that is you have a player like Mike Williams, who in his first year was with the Chargers was just used as, okay, go get the jump ball, right? Like, that was his pretty much whole role in the team. And now, Joe Lombardi comes in with this idea of like, okay, we can just basically make this guy Michael Thomas, right? He'll just run the slant routes. He'll, do, kind of develop that more route, complex route tree. And in those first few games, it was like, okay, this is popping, right? He had like 300 yards in the first 4 games or something. He was going crazy. But recently it slowed down. The drops have kind of picked up. So I think it's a combination of that. I mean, the drops have picked up for the whole team. Unfortunately, they're at 29 or 30 drops at this point. And so I think when you have players like Jared Cook, who's used to the same system, but hasn't always had the most surefire hands. You have Mike Williams in that regard as well. Now Austin Eckler is dropping balls. I think it's sort of like we said, a snowball effect. And then I think what you saw really in the Broncos game is compounding that with offensive line injuries and the injuries they've been dealing with. And that's kind of, to me, why it looked like their worst offensive effort of the season.
Yeah, like I think what Alex is hinting at too is like there are a lot of issues with the offense in general, right? But a lot of it is personnel. Like, so the Chargers have a ton of cap space. They have 10 draft picks next year. So that's why we're kind of like patient with this offense, because, they don't have a second running back they can trust. They had Ito Smith on a visit today. Like, no one knows what to expect there. Offensive line is banged up. You have 30 drops in 11 games, which is very uncharacteristic for the Chargers in general over the past few years. So there's a lot of contributing factors, which of course makes things, more difficult for an offensive coordinator.
Yeah. And that's very consistent with kind of where I'm at with the Chargers. Like, I had them 9-8, and I gave them a tie coming into the year. I think I had them 9-8-1. I was like, if anyone's going to tie, it's going to be the freaking Chargers, man. But I was like, I think they're going to be really good. I don't think they're going to be the team that they can be in 2 or 3 years from now. I think they have and had some pretty clear warts on the roster. Like, they have these amazing high end players, but they just have a lot of holes to fill. So I think, you see it all the time. Like fans want it to happen now. We saw it with Carolina this year. Cardinals had it a little bit last year. Like, just need to, give some of these, younger teams a little bit more time. And I do think the Chargers are very much in the playoff mix, but there's a lot of good there too. It's not like,
right.
I've been kind of pushing this in a negative direction, which, there's a lot of good there too. And I think when you see the chemistry that Herbert has with Mike Williams, I think is very promising. We'll see if they ultimately extend him. But like Herbert's ability outside the numbers,
it's insane.
Like 20 plus yards, like those throws that he makes, you can't defend that area of the field, especially when you develop the timing routes on comebacks and just well-placed like back shoulders. Then you look at like what he's done in very small sample size with like Donald Parham. Like maybe I'm getting ahead of myself with Parham, but I don't know. I feel like this is just kind of the calm before the storm, and they're doing a lot of learning, and they're gonna be really, really good for a long time, I think. Go ahead.
I think there's a lot of positive, like you said. we're just talking about the negative, because we're coming off of a 2 and 3 month that was a little grating at times. But I mean, you have Justin Herbert, you have Keenan Allen, you have Austin Eckler, who's one of 3 running backs with 10 touchdowns from scrimmage and 1,000 scrimmage yards. So he's been going crazy. When Joey Bosa is healthy, when Derwin James is healthy, like having him back this year has been huge. Probably the best safety in the league. So like, there's obviously like positive things to talk about. And if they have time left, like there's 6 games, and if you beat the Bengals, you put yourself in a position to kind of get into clinching that wild card. So I mean, I think the direction is up for sure.
Yeah, this would be a very different tone if we were having this conversation last week as opposed to this week.
Yeah, no, definitely. So now that you've brought up the Bengals, let's talk about. I think I had a tweet that maybe spurred this whole conversation that I didn't know I was maybe provoking you guys when I did it, but I guess I should have known. But yeah, I said that I think there's a chance this weekend that we kind of shift back a little bit towards, okay, maybe Burrow is better than Justin Herbert. Now, I want to preface this by saying that you're in good position if you have either of those guys. They're both,
100%.
I think both, you look 5-7 years from now, those guys will probably both be top 5-7 quarterbacks. But I just want to talk a little bit about like comparing the two players and just kind of get your sense maybe of like what maybe criticisms you have of Herbert, what positive things there are. But from my perspective, I see Herbert as, kind of, I don't want to say a boomer bust passer because he does some of the quick game stuff very well. But if you're comparing him to Joe Burrow, I do see a little bit more like quick twitch, whether that's the movement in the pocket, a little bit more just better reactions after the snap, that post snap processor. He just is a little bit more comfortable navigating those tough situations. And it's tough because I think Herbert is extending plays. He makes really good plays out of rhythm. But I watched that Broncos game a couple of times. It's like he gets to his second read a little bit too slow, or he is scrambling a little bit too early, or the pocket presence just a little bit off. Whereas Burrow just feels very like bang, 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 bang. Mm-hmm. One thing I will say about Burrow is he makes a few more like stupid throws than Herbert does. So it's not like it's like easy to say that Burrow is just smarter than Herbert. It's just in a little bit different way. So yeah, what do you guys think about my statement that Burrow could be viewed as a better quarterback than Herbert?
Well, I think, depending on who you ask, right? Like if you watch Good Morning Football America, a certain host on there loves Joe Burrow for his swagger and his attitude. And like, that's the reason why he likes Joe Burrow more. And I'm like, okay, like that's your prerogative. That's your style, like whatever. But I think when it comes to like on the field, I think your assessment that Joe Burrow is a little more comfortable with the mental side of things right now is fair. And I think part of that is obviously, that he's been in the same system for 2 years. They brought in a lot of concepts from his LSU days. He has his former number 1 receiver on his team. So I think it's fair. I think it's a fair assessment to say that Joe Burrow is better at the mental side of things. He does process much quicker. That was one of my favorite things about grading him in the draft process, was just how quickly he could process and read through things and problem solve. And so that's been a bit of a work in progress through Justin Herbert's career so far, I would say. I know that he was fantastic under pressure as a rookie. This year, that's kind of come back to the norm, as that statistic normally tends to do. But I think, he's generally very poised under the pocket and very poised under pressure. And the thing about Justin Herbert is that he doesn't have a ton of turnover-worthy plays when under pressure. I think it's like 2 or 3 right now, if I'm not mistaken. So that's the good thing. Like the passer rating and the numbers and things like that, those will come and go. But generally speaking, I feel like Herbert is very poised under pressure. And like you said, it's just that arm talent. And so could we maybe get there this weekend with people kind of crowning Joe Burrow? I think that's going to be natural, because I think the Bengals are going to win. I'm not too comfortable or confident this week. But I just think once the mental side of things really catches up for Justin Herbert, then, he's got every single tool you could possibly want. We saw last week he should have had 100 yards rushing. So to me, like, that's just where we're at. I think Burrow is more head mentally, but Herbert's physical upside is just unmatched in this league.
Anything you want to add, Alex?
Yeah, no, for sure. I think one of the big differences was coming out of the draft too. You obviously had Joe Burrow, who, played at LSU, playing the SEC, versus Justin Herbert kind of came out less pro ready, I would say. Joe Burrow is also 25, Justin Herbert is 23. So there's kind of an age difference there in terms of when they came out. So I do think that is, kind of worth mentioning. So in terms of the processing speed, I do think Justin Herbert kind of will eventually get there, even though if he's a little slower right now. But as Steven said, like, I think the physical tools difference between the two and like what they can do in this league, like, I think the ceiling for Joe Burrow is probably top 10, between that top 5, top 10 range. But I think the ceiling for Justin Herbert is kind of top 1, right? Like, if he does kind of get that mental side of things, he can throw the ball 60 yards downfield on a, frozen rope in time, like, that's kind of crazy. And, you just don't see many quarterbacks other than Mahomes or Rodgers that really have those kind of abilities. So yeah, no, I think that just breaking it down between the two, I think Burrow is kind of the more precise passer right now at the moment. And he could end up staying that way as well. He kind of was the number 1 draft pick for a reason in that regard. Yeah. But I do think, like Steven says, the intangibles and the physical tools that Justin Herbert has are why, if I'm starting a franchise tomorrow, I'm probably, picking him as, one of the first 3 quarterbacks, you pick off the board, along with Allen and Mahomes and all those guys. So I think it's definitely a comparison. And like Steven said, I do think the Bengals are going to win this week, because the Chargers are just not in a good place right now. But naturally, just comparing those 2 quarterbacks, I do think Justin Herbert just gives you a little bit more of that X factor right now than say Joe Burrow does.
So you guys are both, for sure, if you're redrafting, you're both taking Herbert above Burrow.
Yeah.
And I'm not even saying one way or the other. I've been saying all year up until that last week. And it's, it's a small sample size of both these guys. It's like you can have, when they're this early in your career, it's only natural you're going to have a slightly more overreactions, because it's like, it's like when a passer rating can skyrocket in week 2, it's like, it's just a smaller sample size. Anyway.
Well, I think to your point, like if we're doing a redraft, it's Herbert 1, Burrow 2. Like, it's not like there's this big gap between the two in terms of like redrafting or where they're at. I think, I happen to think that Burrow is a fantastic quarterback. I don't have him in the top 10 yet, but Brady's probably never going to retire at this point. But Russell Wilson has been bad this year. Josh Allen's kind of regressed a little bit. Aaron's getting up there too. So, it could stand to reason that, both of these quarterbacks are consensus top 10 guys as soon as next year. So I don't think that there's like a huge difference between the two, but I just think, like the physical tools with Justin Herbert give him such a higher upside, like Alex was saying. But I'm a fan of Joe Burrow. I like watching him play. And I definitely can see the argument for why people would prefer him over Justin Herbert at this point.
I think
I was just going to say, I think also two numbers to kind of watch in these two quarterbacks are you have Justin Herbert, who I think is at 1.9% turnover worthy plays right now. Joe Burrow a little bit higher, around 3.2. So that's kind of a number to watch and see, how that kind of transgresses. And then you unfortunately do have Justin Herbert, who's got 8.5 to 9% drop percentage with his receivers right now. So that's something to watch. And Joe Burrow is a little bit lower in that regard. So I could sort of see that kind of evening the field between the two statistically. But like Steven said, I would definitely do in retrospect. You sort of have Herbert 1, Burrow 2, and then Tua. Unfortunately for him, 3.
Probably a ways down. A ways down.
I'll give him a little bit of credit. He's been playing better recently. I know because I unfortunately have to watch the Dolphins because I'm considered Florida area and I hate watching Dolphins. But
oh man, I hope at some point I'll have a hard answer on that because I really do. I go back and forth. I think I'm higher on Burrow than a lot of people. I think he throws with a certain level of anticipation and he has a quick-wittedness about just his approach as a passer that you just don't see. So if Herbert ever gets it, it's amazing. But they're seriously neck and neck. And just having this conversation, I'm like thinking like that's literally our debate. There is the career debate between Rodgers and Tom Brady. If you take out like the who wins Super Bowls, like Brady's a little bit more.
And
Rodgers is more talented.
I'm sort of very publicly a Rodgers person over a Brady person. But,
Me too.
Unfortunately, just because he's in Green Bay, Brady's been winning all the Super Bowls and Rodgers out here showing his feet everywhere. So, I do think he's the more talented one of the two.
Yeah.
But, we were talking on our show, of course, from a Chargers fan standpoint, I don't feel confident about this game, but from an NFL standpoint, this should have been the game that was flexed, right? You have the opportunity to have this future generational, quarterback debate, and it would start in this game. Yeah. And, I think that's a huge missed opportunity from an NFL standpoint. But like I said, I'm glad that this is just on CBS and not Sunday Night Football.
Yeah, it's so frustrating because it's on the front hand, I get it's a business, Denver and Mahomes, those are the established big markets. That's the safe route. Right. But part of the reason, the Bengals and Chargers, they're smaller markets, but you give them more primetime games and they play good football. You're going to grow the fan base. So it's come on, no one cares about Teddy Bridgewater getting his ass beat by Patrick Mahomes.
And I also just feel like the NFL is the sport that's sort of catching up to the fact that everything's nationalized now and no one really cares where these teams are. It's just the guys that go out there. Who cared about the Bucks before Giannis got there?
Yeah.
Sure. And now the Bucks are on prime time all the time. Right. Yep. So I feel like the Bengals can kind of be the same way.
So speaking of the lesser talented quarterbacks beating, that was back to the Rodgers Brady debate. I was going to say, speaking of lesser talented quarterbacks beating more talented quarterbacks, you guys both said that you're taking the Bengals this weekend.
Yeah. No, I think just starting off with these two teams, it's really that the offenses are headed in two different directions. Cause I think Cincy has figured out a lot of things out. 5 of their last 6 games, they've scored 30 plus points, put up 40 in a couple of those games, most recently against Pittsburgh. The Chargers did too. So they can kind of figure out their offense at times, but they've only scored 30 plus once in their last 6. So that's just sort of the offensive trajectory they're on now. So if you tell me that the Chargers figure their offense out and this turns into a shootout, I think either team can win. But I think since he's actually been playing pretty good defense recently with some of the guys that they got there. I don't know. The road game, 1 p.m. start time, hasn't been great for the Chargers this year. Kind of reminds me a little bit of the Baltimore game, unfortunately, where they sort of went on the road and had that happen to them. Plus all the injuries that have been piling up. So I'd love to see it, but my big concern with this game is just I'm looking at the secondary matchups, and I think Michael Davis can hold his own against Jamar Chase kind of okay, but then I'm looking at, T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd on, Chris Harris and Tavon Campbell, and I do not feel confident in those matchups at all. Then you got Joe Mixon, who's,
Sorry to interrupt you there, but have the Chargers done any like one-on-one stuff against receivers with Derwin James this year? I can't say that I've noticed it because I remember back in like training camp, they were having him go one-on-one and like Keenan Allen all the time. Have they done that at all this year that you've noticed? Like, could we see Derwin on Jamar Chase this week?
They've only had him play against receivers when Chris Harris has been out. So he missed a couple games early in the season, particularly against the Raiders. And Derwin, it wasn't against receivers, but Derwin covered a lot. He covered Darren Waller quite a bit in that one. So he's played primarily safety, and he will cover receivers like on occasion. But you know, they kind of prefer him to be that chess piece in the middle right now.
Yeah, because he actually kind of matches up physically with Jamar. I would love to see that, but I don't think we do.
Yeah. I'd love to see Derwin on Jamar too. It's probably like kind of one of our only hopes.
Come on, Brandon Staley, make it happen.
Yeah, I'd love to see it. But yeah, and then the big concern in this game is Joe Mixon, because he's running like, you know, freight train behind that, you know, Bengals offensive line, and the Chargers just have no answers on the run defense right now. So I think if you can tell me that they like stifle Joe Mixon to only 100 yards as opposed to 165, maybe I feel okay picking them. But no, I just, to me, they have too many question marks on defense. And now, unfortunately, a lot of emerging question marks on offense, to the point where, it just makes them hard to pick this game. But of course, it's the NFL and it's the AFC. And I wouldn't be surprised if this turns into a 41-37 game that one team wins one way or the other based on some, you know, coin flip. But it's hard for me to pick the Chargers against a team that has the offensive firepower that the Bengals do right now.
Yeah, to me, there are a few concerns from my perspective, right? Because Matt Filer might play. You know, he was back at practice today. If he plays, I'll feel a little bit more comfortable there. But Trey Hendrickson has been, you know, fantastic for them. I expect him to completely eat Storm Norton alive off of the right side. Rashawn Slater will hold his own. Like, that's been who he is. But then you have DJ Reader, and you have Larry Ogunjobi, and then you have all the linebackers. And so if Matt Filer's not playing in this game, Marcus, like, I don't even think the Chargers hit 20 again. Like, I think it might be a brutal showing for them, just because his presence changes so much because the depth is just not there. You know, you'd want to talk about one of the things that frustrates me. The Chargers drafted Brendan Hymus to be like the backup guard, and for whatever reason, they refused to play him. So we're stuck with Senio Clemente and Michael Schofield. And then you mentioned, you know, on the defensive side of things, Asante Samuel Jr. is in concussion protocol. If he were playing, I would feel, again, a little bit more comfortable there, but he's probably not. And so, like Alex said, I think Michael Davis is capable of holding his own, you know, against a Jamar Chase or T. Higgins, whoever they kind of match him up with. But Chris Harris has been so bad this year. Like, we've ranted about him quite a bit on our show. Tavon Campbell, former CFL corner, is their other corner, and he's been very up and down as well. So you've got arguably the best trio of receivers, or at least, you know, up there, going up against a banged up secondary. And then you've got a great defensive line going up against a banged up Chargers offensive line. So I just don't feel good about this conversation. And again, if Matt Filer plays, they'll probably hit 20, maybe 24 if we're lucky. But if Matt Filer doesn't play, I don't even see how they get to like 17.
Mm-hmm. Well, I was just checking. There is one saving grace here. Trey Hendrickson has played 505 snaps this season. He has only lined up on the left side 5 of those snaps. So we'll see what the Bengals do there, because I agree that would be advantageous, because you know, I'm always a guy like, put your best pass rusher on their liability, especially when it's this big of a difference.
Yes.
But maybe he's not comfortable on that side, so that could help slow down the pass rush a little bit.
There we go.
Yeah, man, Bengals are really tough right now. I just put them in my like could win the Super Bowl tier at number 10. And they're playing really good football, and I think they match up pretty well against the Chargers for basically every reason you guys just said. So I also would expect the Bengals to win here, but I don't think we're gonna get that defining like, oh, Joe Burrow was so much better than Justin Herbert in this game either. I
mean, we've seen the last couple of weeks, right? Like, the Bengals have really leaned into Joe Mixon and running the ball. And, it makes sense. You're increasing Joe Burrow's efficiency. You're taking a bunch of pressure off of him. And the Steelers' run defense is like at least good. Like I feel like they're at least league average. And so the Chargers, they're worse in the league. They've improved a little bit since the bye week, but they're still the worst in the league. So, I, like Alex said, if Joe Mixon gets under 150, I probably would be like, okay, good job, defense. Like, that's where we're at right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I if you put Burrow on the Chargers and put Herbert on the Bengals in this game, like that would only accentuate me picking the Bengals. Like, I really don't even think this game is kind of about the quarterbacks. I hope it does turn into like that kind of style of shootout, but yeah, I just don't think the Chargers are that equipped to handle that right now. But yeah, as far as the Burrow Herbert debate, yeah, I think Joe Burrow should become the best Joe on his team first, and then we can debate, whether he's the best quarterback between the two.
What, Justin Jones isn't the best Justin on the
well,
on the Steelers?
Well, Alex thinks he is.
that's my joke because I love Justin Jones, but yeah,
he's been good lately, man. He stands out.
Yeah.
And he's hilarious, man. No. The defensive line has been really frustrating this year. Jones has been hurt. Linval has COVID right now. Linval Joseph, that is. Jerry Tillery, their former first-round pick, has been basically awful all year long, and they refuse to bench him. So, yeah, it's not been fun. Like their best run defense has come when they move Joey Bosa inside, and they only do that like 3 or 4 times a game at this point because they obviously want him, on the edge. That's why you're paying him. But the interior defensive line, I expect it to be like completely overhauled in the offseason.
Yeah, they got a lot of work to
do. Their best run defense is when Justin Herbert throws for 400 yards and gets up 2 touchdowns quickly. That's how you run defend with the Chargers.
All right. Well, thank you so much, you guys, for coming on. It was a ton of fun, and I'm sorry I didn't throw the Derwin jersey on for this one, but enjoy your weekends, and yeah, thanks for coming on. Anything else you guys want to say before we get out of here?
No, Derwin James, best safety in the league, but that's it for me.
Oh, thanks for having us on, man.
Yeah, thanks, Marcus. We appreciate it.
So thank you to Alex and Steven taking time out of their busy schedules to come onto the show. So make sure you guys go check out the Guilty as Charged podcast, especially if you're Chargers fans, but even as just a general NFL fan, I do enjoy their show. They do a great job covering the game, covering their team. You'll learn a lot, even if you aren't a Chargers fan. So go check it out. And then, let's actually kind of reshape your mindset here. We're going to look back at week 12 now. I know it's kind of out of order. We looked ahead with the Bengals-Chargers game coming up. Now we're going to look back at week 12 and reflect on what was a really good slate of games, a lot of important matchups. So I have some games I have more to take away than others. So just a heads up as we move on. Probably going to be spending a lot less time as we go, but the first 6 or 7 games here, I have some pretty major takeaways, and then we'll get into the mailbag when that's all done. But we are going to start, as promised, with Monday Night Football and my power rankings adjustments, because I did release the power rankings this week before Monday Night Football, and there are some changes needed here. Seattle is going to drop down 4 spots from 21 to 25, just ahead of the Chicago Bears there. And seriously, we'll talk about them a little bit, but everything we said about Seattle on last week's podcast, which was one of our main topics, was how that team is just falling apart and if they're going to need a rebuild. Like, we spent a lot of time on that last week, so I don't want to regurgitate the same stuff. If you missed last week's podcast and you want to hear more about the Seahawks, I do definitely suggest checking that out because Monday Night Football was more of the same, man. The offense just is so dependent on big plays, none of the easy stuff being there. The defense continues to play well, but it's just not enough. So Seahawks are going to drop down 4. What a just embarrassing loss. No offense to Washington, but if Seattle was going to be anywhere in the mix in an NFC that's up for grabs, like Washington, for God's sake, is in the mix for that 7 seed in the NFC. if Seattle was going to get in that conversation, it had to start on Monday Night Football, and it was just more of the same. So they're going to drop down 4. They are genuinely one of the worst teams in the entire NFL, and they're giving their first-round pick to the New York Jets. And if you told me before the season started that the Jets pick from Seattle could be before their pick, I would laugh at you. But, I mean, that could very well happen, depending on how the rest of the season plays out, obviously. But what a disaster for the Seattle Seahawks. As for Washington, they are going to move up one, and really Carolina, Washington, New Orleans, and Philadelphia are all going to benefit from Seattle falling, because this really was more about Seattle continuing to suck than it was about anyone standing out to me. But I will say with Washington, I want to tip my cap to Ron Rivera, because this is now 2 seasons in a row where, and he's done it in different ways, but really back against the wall or everyone's doubting his team, and they kind of persevere and impress a little bit. Last year, they were viewed by me and everybody as, one of the 2 or 3 worst teams in the NFL. And they did a great job of finding different talent and finding the right pieces and putting things together and establishing a culture, ultimately, is what this is and was about last year. And they snuck into the playoffs, right? They won their crappy division with like 7 wins. They put up a fight against the Super Bowl champs and ultimately had a really impressive season. And heading into this year, they had expectations to be a legit playoff team. And for the first half of the season, it wasn't there. This team was derailed by injuries. They lost their plan at quarterback with Fitzpatrick. Taylor Heineke, with very minimal experience, has been kind of flushed into action. And he was very polarizing to start. But now they're figuring a lot of stuff out on both sides of the ball. I would say Taylor Heineke, now getting Curtis Samuel in there, Logan Thomas in there. The offensive line continues to impress. Taylor Heineke has settled in. And now back-to-back weeks, what is most important for me about Taylor Heineke is no turnover where he plays. In the last 2 weeks, that's kind of been his bugaboo, is he's been this kind of gunslinger, take the good with the bad type. But really over the last couple of weeks, you're getting some of the nice plays in there, but it's not coming at the cost of like mind-explodingly bad, sorry for the bad grammar there, but plays where it's like, what are you doing? You can't just chuck a ball into double coverage because you're bored. And he's not doing that the last couple weeks. And if that means he's learning, they might have something there in Taylor Heineke. Probably not as like the future of the team or anything, but as a guy that they can kind of treat as a bridge quarterback as they look for their franchise quarterback, and as a guy that maybe could get hot in a playoff game or two and keep your season alive. Just an interesting, solid NFL quarterback. Not necessarily a solid starter, but a guy that can be, maybe like what Tyrod Taylor is for the Houston Texans, or Teddy Bridgewater for the Denver Broncos, Andy Dalton for the Bears, like something like that. Clearly, he's already kind of in that tier at this point. So they're building something, I think, outside of a few coverage busts, which have remained an issue for this team. They're solidifying in the secondary. William Jackson is playing much, much better football. He was miserable to start the season. He's been kind of a man corner throughout his career. Ron Rivera loves himself some zone coverage, so he's kind of had to learn the scheme. I think he's settling in much better. You've got Deron Payne and, of course, Jonathan Allen up front, wreaking havoc, generating a pass rush, even without Chase Young in there. Montez Sweat has missed some time. So the defense has come together. That's supposed to be Ron Rivera's pedigree and what he's supposed to be good at, and the defense has played so much better over the last month, and that's where the Chase Young injury is really disheartening, because this defense could be trending towards like a legit high-end playoff defense, I think, if you had that alpha edge pass rusher. But his lack of emergence this year and then the injury toppled on top of it, ultimately, you just can't take this team all that seriously. But they have really solidified some things, and Ron Rivera, I think, is off of the hot seat that he maybe was on earlier on in the season. And they can look forward to the next season and, of course, compete for the 7 seed. I would not take them seriously if they got that 7 seed, but that would ultimately be a huge win for Washington. And I don't think their schedule is very difficult down the stretch, from what I remember on this team, like before the year started. So good stuff for Washington, trending in the right direction. Still a lot of work to do there, but just in general, a thumbs up. Good job. Tough, hard-fought win against Russell Wilson, which, as bad as the Seahawks are, you still gotta scratch and claw to walk out of a win against Russ. So, but Russ is not playing great right now, just as we said on the podcast last week, which I encourage you guys to go check out. So that's Monday Night Football. Next up, we're going to talk about what was an interesting game despite being not much of a good game, and that was Carolina at the Miami Dolphins. And this was interesting because it felt kind of like turning points for both of these teams, where Miami has had kind of almost like a reverse Panthers season, because the Panthers came out and started super hot. They were blowing away expectations, whereas the Dolphins sucked early on, and they were probably the most disappointing team based on public perception. Those that watch this channel didn't have maybe the highest expectations for Miami this season, but now they're kind of back to the expectations I set them at. They actually, as I just showed, the power rankings are right back at 20, where I ranked them coming into the season. But anyway, this game totally had a turning point feel for both teams. For Carolina, it's like your season's done, man. It's been done twice throughout the season, because you started 3-0, hype got way ahead of itself, and then things caught up with the team. Offensive line, injuries, the defense regressed a little bit because they came out to this elite start. And then again, like, they signed Cam Newton after the Sam Darnold injury, and it's like, oh my gosh, Cam's back. We beat the Cardinals. We're gonna go make the playoffs now with Cam Newton. And again, I was like, tempering expectations on the Panthers. Like, guys, Cam Newton hasn't been good in the NFL for 3 years. How many times do myself and others have to say that? Like, he is such a limited passer. He's a good runner, but he's not like insanely explosive as a runner. Like, he is in that same category of those quarterbacks we talked about. Heineke, Dalton, Tyrod Taylor, Teddy Bridgewater. Cam Newton is in that group, right? If the Panthers added Andy Dalton, or they added Teddy Bridgewater, who they had last year, no one would have been like, oh, the Panthers are going to be just fine. Like, they're going to be a playoff team. No, like, that's who Cam Newton is. I'm sorry to say it, and I know it hurts Panthers fans, because we all remember 2015, one of the better quarterback seasons we've ever seen, and the Superman chest and the dabbing and all that stuff. That Cam Newton is gone. And with this Cam Newton, the Panthers season it's lost. Like, they don't have an offense. And it's not just Cam Newton. It really is not just Cam Newton. I don't want to put it all on him, because that's unfair. This offensive line is a disaster. You have to point a lot of fingers at this front office for, frankly, drafting J.C. Horn, which was a pick I wasn't crazy about. I said they should have taken a player like Rashawn Slater, who's playing like an all-pro caliber left tackle in their first season. I thought that was a big mistake. I thought, they had a lot more leeway with their salary cap to make better investments on the offensive line, whether it was go for a Joe Tooney or a Morgan Moses, or, there's a lot of offensive linemen that have changed hands. Matt Filer, Corey Linsley. There were pieces to be added in free agency this summer that they elected to go for. They're such bad players that I struggle to recall them, but that they keep coming back. Cam Irving and Pat Elflein. Like, that was, from the get-go, just an atrocious decision. And I said it at the time. So many people were laughing at them at the time, but it was like, oh, it'll be just fine. Turns out, no. Their offensive line is terrible. And Cam Newton is a flat-footed, I've always called him a catapult passer. Yes, he can move on designed runs, but even back in like his 2015 season, I hated this about him. Watch the Super Bowl, the strip sack that Von Miller had in the Super Bowl. If my memory is serving me correct, it could have been a Danielle Hunter sack the next season, now that I say that. But literally just standing in the back of the end zone with his weird mechanics where he's tilting his upper half backwards, and then he like throws across his body every time, which is a whole nother thing. But he stands flat-footed in the pocket. He doesn't move well. He needs a good offensive line, and he doesn't have it. So that's why, like, he's looking so bad for Carolina. And frankly, PJ Walker can probably do more here because he's a much more mobile passer. So that's kind of where they're at, is debating between PJ Walker and Cam Newton at this point. I think Cam Newton's a better player than PJ Walker, but again, the mobility aspect definitely leans towards PJ Walker. But that's where the Panthers are at right now. Their offense is a mess, and there's only so much that young defense can do. I love this defense. I think Matt Rule and the pieces they've added on that side of the ball, you can't argue with. Brian Bird's had another great game in this one. He's a monster, but there's only so much a defense can do when your offense is that bad. So that was a huge takeaway from the Panthers. And then for the Miami Dolphins, it's like the complete opposite. Again, like, their season is coming together. This defense is shaping up the way they envisioned. You've got Jalen Phillips adding that pass rush element that I said coming into the year that this defense was due for a regression, and that hit hard, right? Like, this was not a very good defense. They weren't forcing those unbelievable amounts of turnovers. For those that still doubt that turnovers are fluky and unrepeatable, if you are like the Dolphins leaned on being a turnover heavy team last year. Like, they gave up a lot of yards, but they turned the ball over, and they ultimately looked like a really good defense. Heading into this year, I was like, that's not going to repeat, and it hasn't. But what I did say was, but if Jalen Phillips can get in there and they can be a better pass rushing team and be better at actual functional defense, they might not regress as much. And now they've got Jalen Phillips, who was just unblockable in this game. They've added Javon Holland, which was a draft pick I really liked, because I've always felt like that free safety position has been a lacking element to that defense. So you add those two rookies in that now in the second half of the season are firing full cylinder. Now that defense is much more like the defense I painted coming into the year, where they're a probably a more functionally good defense than they were last year, even if they're not getting the high level of turnovers, which, you know, they can still turn the ball over, don't get me wrong. But it's not like last year where they're in all these close games that they're just like escaping with clutch turnovers in the fourth quarter. That's really what it felt like last year a lot of the time. So you've got the defense settling in, and then on the other side of the ball with Tua, they've been okay. You know, Tua's been solid. I think you're seeing him staying healthy, actually able to like stem together performances and like stack on top of each other and get enough time to actually understand what he's struggling at, where he can improve. Like, as low as I've been on Tua, he has not had an opportunity to really develop to this point. He's been injured. He was being pulled in and out of the lineup last year in these weird games. His offensive line sucks, still sucks, but it's been a little bit better. But now, you know, I've been really low on Tua, and I still kind of am, but at least, you know, I never said he was going to just downright suck. I thought he could be a Jimmy Garoppolo, a Baker Mayfield type has always been my comp on Tua, and I think he's trending more towards that type of player, which is good for Miami for where they're at right now. I think with the defense playing really good, Jalen Waddle emerging like a superstar receiver, frankly, like this, there's nothing this kid can't do. They still need to fix the offensive line. I still think from a play calling perspective, they really have an identity crisis. They know they like RPOs. They know Tua can do that, but there's only so much you want to lean on RPOs and stuff. They don't have much of a run game, which obviously doesn't help. So like they still have a lot of work to do before we can take them really seriously. But they've stabilized and are starting to build up some stuff. And, you know, if they were in the NFC, this would be like a 7 seed type of team. AFC-wise, it's going to be really tough. They could pull it off. I'm not expecting it. But, again, they're getting back to that kind of 20th best team in football. And just to have, like, some sort of answer at quarterback is big for them because they haven't had that up until, I don't know, the last 2 or 3 weeks. Tua has not even been like a starting caliber guy. Now he's at least like not making a lot of mistakes. He's hitting his throws. He's playing in rhythm, and he's been fine. Now, like 3 years from now when his rookie contract's up, and the question is, should they pay him $40 million and make him the future face of the franchise? Or even this summer, if it's like, do you trade him and some picks for Deshaun Watson? Like, that's a different conversation. But as they sit here right now, they're building some stuff, which is much more than they were doing for the first couple months of the season. So for me, this was an interesting game just from like an organizational direction standpoint. Then we have the Jets and the Houston Texans, which actually stood out to me, and I'll go full disclosure here. This was the first time I've watched an all-22 game on the Houston Texans. I've just been doing the condensed versions of Texans games, but I said this week, I was like, it's time. I need to actually take, an hour and a half and do the all-22 for a Houston Texans game. And I did it, and it wasn't terrible. I had virtually no takeaways from the Houston Texans side of things. And the reason I say that is because most of these guys are going to be gone next year. It's guys like Rex Burkhead, frankly, Tyrod Taylor. Some of their offensive linemen are veterans. You've got veterans in the secondary playing. Most of these guys are on one-year deals. They're going to be on their way out. But there are a couple players that I want to talk about with the Texans, because that's really what this season's about, is evaluating young players and figuring out your building blocks. So Jonathan Grenard is a stud. And something I want to do over the next month or so is start to make some more like film breakdown, like stuff on players, 10, 15-minute videos highlighting players and what they're doing on film. And honestly, Jonathan Grenard might make the cut for that. So I don't want to make any promises because I'm very busy. Got the wedding coming up in like 2.5 weeks. But Jonathan Grenard is a just versatile, powerful pass rusher. And he reminds me a lot of Whitney Merciless, who, was a good athlete, but was never like a Watt or a freaky pass rusher type. Really just powerful, crafty rusher. And Jonathan Grenard actually reminds me a lot of Whitney Merciless, believe it or not. So they have a building block there with him. And then another player is Tavier Thomas. He's a slot corner. And this dude's like, if you go and look at his athleticism, this dude's a freaky athlete, and he's been playing in the slot. They've actually pushed Desmond King outside in this defense, and he's been flying around the field. He's been breaking up passes. He's been involved as a run defender, showing off that athleticism. It's a small school guy. He's like 25 years old. I think they have a piece there at slot corner. And then, Reed's been out, right, at free safety. He's a monster. I love Justin Reed. He's one of the more underrated safeties in the NFL. So you've got kind of a 1, 2, 3 layer building block defense, if you will, and you can kind of craft stuff around those pieces. But I want to talk about the New York Jets, because I enjoyed examining the project that is New York, and that's what they are. This is not a good football team. There's a lot of moments in this game where you're like, yeah, that's either that's a player that's got to go, or that's a scheme that they need to rework. But there was still some nice stuff in this game. So I want to start by talking about the Jets defense. And obviously you got to take everything you see against the Houston Texans with a massive brick of salt. But the Jets throughout the season have shown some really fun flashes. So you've got Robert Saleh, the new defensive coach, the head coach there. And then I also want to shout out Jeff Ulbrich, who I thought was a great hire at the time by Robert Saleh. He was in Atlanta last year, where they did some really fun stuff with like Foyesade Oluokun, Deion Jones, and that group of linebackers. Even the Walker kid out of Fresno had a good season, and Jeff Ulbrich was the linebackers coach there. So there's kind of these connections between, I guess, Shanahan, who was there with Atlanta, Saleh, Jeff Ulbrich, that whole unit. Ulbrich worked under Dan Quinn, who is in that Seattle cover 3 tree that Robert Saleh is a part of. So there is a connection there, and I think they have a good relationship, Robert Saleh and Jeff Ulbrich, who is now the defensive coordinator for the New York Jets. And the reason I bring up Jeff Ulbrich is because he is this linebacker guru. And watching this game, there's a player that popped, and that's Quincy Williams, a linebacker who also stems from this Seattle tree. Quincy Williams was drafted by the Jaguars, 3rd round in like 2017, I think. He would have been a rookie on that amazing Jags defense, or he came in the next year. He could have been in 2018, actually. But he didn't stick. He was a third-round pick that got cut by the Jacksonville Jaguars. And he's super athletic. He's a converted safety from a small school. I don't even remember what school he's from, honestly. But he has come in here. He's won a starting job ahead of two interesting young linebackers, Hamza Nasir-el-Din and who's the other guy? Sherwood out of Auburn. Two converted safety types just like him, so they were looking for that fast, weak side linebacker to play next to Mosley, clearly. So Williams was like the third guy in the pecking order, right? They draft Sherwood, I think, in the 4th. They draft Nasir-el-Din in the 6th. And then they just take a flyer on Quincy Williams. And Williams has won that job out, and he's been a badass on the field. He is playing fast. He's tackling extremely well. This is not the first time that he's popped for me. And I just want to shout out Jeff Ulbrich and the work he's done with Quincy Williams, kind of refurbishing his career, because Williams was a third-round pick. He was a fascinating player for what at the time was an elite defense in Jacksonville, and he just never came to fruition. But more and more, I'm learning that like these like I just said, regurgitation projects at like 25, 26 years old, that's a sweet spot. If you have the right coaching staff, you can really hit home runs. And I should have made a list because I'm kind of freeballing this take here, but it's just something I've noticed throughout the league. Is it feels to me, as someone that's covered the league in depth for the last 5 years, we're seeing more and more guys like Quincy Williams kind of make it at 25, 26 years old. I don't know. Maybe I need to do a deeper research into that, but it just popped to me, and it was something I wanted to talk about and a player to keep an eye on, because this is a really athletic guy. He's clearly a great like worker to beat out guys that would have been given those opportunities ahead of him in practice and stuff. And he's got a great coach in Jeff Ulbrich, who's done some really impressive stuff with linebackers. So you got a building block potentially in Quincy Williams at linebacker. And then watching this defense, it's not just Quincy Williams. Like, their front four is so fun to watch. They've got these big athletic dudes up there that they just wreck shit. Like, they just create edginess, to steal a term from the Athletic Football Show, another great podcast, but that's a term that I've fallen in love with these defenses that just, they slant and they stunt and they use big-bodied power players up front. They create edginess. They don't give you clean pockets, and that's Quinnen Williams. It's Falorenzo Fadukasi, one of my favorite, just underrated players in the league, who's a great nose tackle but can generate some power. You got John Franklin Myers in there, underrated player, just got a $56 million contract extension. Talk about regurgitation projects. That's another one right there. John Franklin Myers is as good, if not better, than Eric Armstead, who was a first-round pick and makes like $80 million for the Niners. They're very similar players. John Franklin Myers is a better version of Eric Armstead. So you got Franklin Myers, and then as in the rotation, you've got Sheldon Rankins, who seems to show up with like a pressure once or twice a week, is what it feels like. He's a former first-round kind of, again, regurgitation project. Should probably think of a new word at this point. And then Shaq Lawson is also in the mix there. So they just have this big, powerful front that projects well into next season. And then they got some building blocks in the secondary. You got Bryce Hall, who I think is going to be a good number 2 corner for them. He's not a great athlete. He's not a guy you want man-to-man a ton, but they do lean zone. Again, they ultimately have the Seattle cover 3 tree here with Robert Salah, even though it's a different defense now. It's a lot more split safety quarters stuff, but he's a piece. Bryce Hall, the 5th, 6th round pick that was just a steal, fell for injury concerns. So he's a good player. Javelin Guidry, I've said this many times on this channel. I said it on draft night. I said it when they picked him up in 2020. Javelin Guidry, I had a 3rd to a 4th round grade on. This guy played in a zone-heavy system for Utah, where they are great at coaching up their defensive backs, especially in zone coverage. He had 4.3 speed. He tackles. He plays special teams. Like, smart player. I could not believe that Javelin Guidry went undrafted. And I don't think Joe Douglas could either, because they picked him up. He's been starting in the slot. Well, that's not necessarily true. He had a pass breakup in a quarter shell playing outside corner. He can do a lot of different stuff. Again, he is a heady, fast player, and I think he fell because he's 5'9". But Javelin Guidry is absolutely a piece, probably a long-term slot. But there's no reason he can't be Darius Williams and play outside corner long-term. And then Marcus May is another piece that they have. He's up for free agency this year. He's been on the tag this year. I think he tore his ACL. He's done for the year, but there's a lot of time on the New York Jets, but we haven't spent a lot of time in that group. I do like a lot of the pieces they're building, especially on defense. I think they could be kind of a post-hype, really good defense in year 2. And I like a lot of the stuff they do schematically. They blitz at the right time. I mentioned the stunts and the slants that they do. They create pressure really well. So I just wanted to shout out the Jets defense, because it hasn't been all bad. They've had some really bad weeks in there, but a lot of that is they do have a lack of talent at other spots that do need to be upgraded, like corner, edge rush outside of Franklin Myers. Mosley and Williams haven't been super consistent all season long. Williams is more of an emerging young player, but yeah, that's the Jets defense. And then I want to also just real quick talk about the Jets offense, which still is a massive work in progress. And I have my doubts about LaFleur there, Mike LaFleur. I haven't been particularly impressed by their play calling throughout the season, but it's coming together a lot more lately because their run game is working much more than it did to start the season. And a large part of that is the offensive line is coming together. They just traded for Laurent Duvernay-Tardif. He's, I think, a former Pro Bowler for the Chiefs, but he's a good player nonetheless. They grab him, and you've got Morgan Moses was a good pickup at right tackle. I would say that their center, whose name is Connor McGovern out of Missouri, he's having his best season as a run blocker. You got Elijah Vera-Tucker, who's been paving ways in the run game. And then left tackle George Fant's actually been a piece for them as they wait on Mekhi Becton to come back. So their offensive line, they did invest in that group, unlike the Panthers, unlike the Dolphins, and it is coming together. And I think that's a building block for them. Unfortunately, Zach Wilson continues to really struggle. He's not taking the easy stuff. He's missing throws. He's turning the ball over. He has been probably the most disappointing rookie so far. Of course, he got injured, and the Jets' situation isn't great there, but ultimately, I thought he would look much better as a rookie. I really liked him coming out. I thought he was just a step behind Trevor Lawrence, and to be fair, it's not like Trevor Lawrence has looked that much better, but Zach Wilson has definitely been concerning. I'm not giving up on him, but they need to do a better job, I think, of making things easier for him. He finds himself in a lot of third and longs. It's just been kind of a mess offensively, and it really wasn't that much different here other than the run game kind of waking up in the second half of this game, in large part due to their offensive line. And just something I tweeted about before I get off of the Jets here, which I'm going to do very quickly here, but I had a thought, like, what if they traded the Sam Darnold pick, the second-round pick that they have for trading Sam Darnold to the Panthers? What if they traded that for Saquon Barkley? Saquon stays in New York. It's the 2018 draft, went Sam Darnold and Saquon Barkley. I think Saquon would fit really well on the Jets, especially now that they're running the ball well. I don't know. It's just a thought. I think that could be an interesting trade for both sides to entertain. I think it would be beneficial for the Giants, who just don't have a situation for Saquon. They also don't have as much salary cap as the Jets are going to have to pay Saquon Barkley, which you're going to have to do here. So it was just a thought. It's a very fitting trade that I would like to see. It's probably not going to happen, but I think it would make a lot of sense. Okay, we've got Pittsburgh at the Cincinnati Bengals. I'm not going to talk about the Pittsburgh Steelers. It's more of the same. Like, they're a good defense, but in 2021, defense is going to fluctuate. And their offense just is so unexplosive. Like, they had one good connection between Chase Claypool and Big Ben in this game. And then beyond that, there just was nowhere to go with the football. Big Ben can't create at his age. It's been beaten to death at this point that the Steelers' offense is hard to watch. What was not hard to watch was the Cincinnati Bengals in this game. Joe Burrow was incredible in this game. And I know I'm like a Joe Burrow guy, and I talk him up all the time, but seriously, this was one of the better quarterbacked games of the season. Now, he did throw one bad pick, and I guess I'll talk about that. He has a confident processor. He did coming out. He's started, 20 games? He makes some mistakes that I do think hold him back a little bit. And there was another one in this game. Fortunately, he played so well on every other drop back in this game that it didn't matter. So I will point that out. He is a very confident quarterback. He has what you call a confident processor. And he, at his age, is still going to make some mistakes. I'm okay with that. I think he doesn't make as many mistakes as a lot of other young quarterbacks, so I'm fine with it. But everything else he did in this game was elite quarterbacking on every box. Like, seriously, his pocket presence was incredible. His accuracy was, he wasn't just completing passes. He's like hitting guys in stride on the move. He's like threading needles over the middle to T. Higgins to like throwing lanes that only a few quarterbacks in the NFL can see. He dropped a beautiful deep ball to T. Higgins that just had arch and was in the perfect spot for T to go attack it on like a 50-50 ball deep down the field from like the opposite hash. He had another throw to the deep corner from the opposite hash. Like, that is an NFL throw, right? And that's, people are like, Burrow doesn't have the arm strength to consistently hit NFL throws. And you watch this game, it's like, bullshit, he doesn't. Like, his arm is more than good enough. And watching this game, maybe this is just confirmation bias. I don't think it was. This PFF supported it. The PFF had the highest quarterback grade of the week. He is Aaron Rodgers from the waist down as far as his mobility, his quick twitch athleticism, his pocket presence, and he's Tom Brady from the waist up. And frankly, Tom Brady's a confident processor that makes some mistakes that leave you scratching your head too. So, I mean, seriously, he is so good. Now, we're going to talk about Joe Burrow with the guilty as charged guys, so some of this is going to have already been mentioned, but he was unbelievable in this game. And then it's not just him. The Bengals defense is just good. Like, all three levels. They've got a good pass rush. They have 3 deep at defensive tackle. And then like 3 deep at edge, 4 deep at edge, because you've got Hendrickson, you've got Hubbard, you've got Cam Sample. That's really it. But yeah, their front is 5 or 6 deep. They got 2 or 3 good linebackers, Jermaine Pratt, Logan Wilson, good players. In the secondary, you've got Chidobe Awuzie, one of the better free agent signings of the year. Eli Apple's been playing much, much better football since the first, month of the season. They do have Trey Waynes on the roster somewhere. I haven't seen him all year. I think he's been hurt. You got Mike Hilton in the slot. Even Darius Phillips can play a little bit. Safety, you've got one of the 2 or 3 best safeties in the NFL in Jesse Bates. You've got Von Bell, a good strong safety. Like, they're just a balanced, all-around defense. Lou Anarumo's been a good defensive coordinator. And, they don't give up a ton of huge plays. They tackle pretty well. Like, they're just a good, solid defense. And what I'm getting at here is, if Joe Burrow's playing like this, and this defense is just solid, why not the Bengals? Why could the Bengals not go on a run? I mean, crap, the Bengals can still get the 1 seed in the AFC, by the way, guys. Don't forget that. What if they did? What if they got the 1 seed? I don't think that's that out of reach. They're probably within a game of it right now. So why couldn't they host, say, who would it, there's no way to know who it would be. But why couldn't they host the Patriots or the Titans or whoever in the second round and then host the Chiefs and go to the Super Bowl and then sneak away with a win? Like, I can't think of a good reason why they couldn't do that on a reasonable basis. So really exciting times for the Bengals. I think they're benefiting from the AFC being such a cluster F right now. But, hey, Bengals fans aren't complaining. That this is the most exciting Bengals season since, prime Andy Dalton, at least, if not above that. So, yeah, this was about the Bengals, just a statement victory. Then we have Tampa Bay at Indianapolis. This was a really feisty, competitive game. A lot of running the football, a lot of forced fumbles, and just kind of just old school football, honestly. Indianapolis went punch for punch with Tampa Bay in this game, and that to me speaks more about Tampa Bay. It speaks more about Indianapolis proving again that they're a very good football team. They're kind of like what we said about the Bengals defense. They're like that on both sides of the ball. Like, they're just very well balanced. They don't have any glaring weaknesses, but they don't have any defining strengths either, other than the fact that Darius Leonard can force a fumble every other week, which is just this unique trait that they have. They have this rare asset. That's what Darius Leonard is, and he had a good game in coverage and stuff, but that's really the argument for Darius Leonard to be paid $20 million. And at this point, I'm not even going to push back on it that much. He is so good at letting ball carriers come to him, basically, giving up 2 or 3 yards by not necessarily going to them. But what he does in that time is he calculates, those sci-fi movies where it's a robot using their robot vision, and it's doot, 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 doot. It pauses time, and it's we're going to do this move, this move, this move, this move, and then you're going to hit play, and time's going to fast forward, and it's Iron Man's missiles come to mind. I don't know. That's a weird tangent, but that's what I feel about Darius Leonard on defense. He monitors the ball carrier coming at him, and then he calculates the perfect punch to get the thing out. It's Pat Tillman. Right? Charles Tillman? Pat Tillman? I get those two confused because one of them, Pat Tillman's the military guy that died, right? Charles Tillman. But it's Peanut Tillman. Anyway, sorry. My NFL history is lacking, but it's like him, except for Leonard has another 20 pounds on the cornerback to, have the strength to punch that thing out. It's incredible. It's a weird asset that they have. But yeah, the Colts are just super solid. They run the ball well. JT is best running back in football right now. So, they're in the mix here. I think the Titans, the Colts could catch the Titans in the AFC with how injured Tennessee is right now. And then for Tampa Bay, I'm not worried about them. I still think they're in a good position to make a run in the playoffs. They haven't suffered any season-ending injuries, even though they're beat up a little bit right now. They're not playing their best football. I think they have holes defensively. They're still very good, but their secondary just hasn't been what it was last year. And you can pass on the Bucs, basically. And then offensively, they just have not been the same without Antonio Brown. And watching this team, it's every time Brady throws an incompletion or an interception, I kid you not, you will hear the announcers say, well, Brady's expecting this from the receiver, so it's not really on Brady, but... And there's totally truth to that. What makes Brady great and has made him great is he's playing 4D chess, right? He has this rare timing and field vision to see these windows that only he can see. The defense can't see it, and oftentimes his receivers can't see the holes and what Brady is trying to do. So, technically speaking, from what Brady sees and what he's anticipating, no, a lot of these picks and a lot of these incompletions are not on him. But that is so dependent on the chemistry with his receivers. And honestly, he doesn't have that with Mike Evans, not over the middle of the field at least. I think he has it with Evans like in the red zone and outside the numbers. He doesn't really have it with Chris Godwin. That's never really been Chris Godwin's game. Like, Chris Godwin's just this freak athlete that's hard to cover in a straight line. But he's not like a timing receiver. Scotty Miller is not that player. There was actually an interception in this game, and that's what happened. Like, Brady threw outside leverage. Miller released inside. But Brady threw it outside anyway because that's what he was expecting from Scotty Miller. But there was no throw throw there. Like, whoever's fault it was is irrelevant. The point I'm trying to make is that there's missing aspects to this offense that you see when Gronk is in there. And, Bucs did score 38 points. A large part of that was Gronk going off in this one. And you see it when Antonio Brown is in there. And that you see is those crazy throws where Brady's like making throws that nobody makes. Like, he'll be under pressure within 2 seconds, and he'll still get the ball out with anticipation to like a random open spot in the zone. But the problem is he's still attempting those throws, but the receiver isn't getting to that spot. But Antonio Brown and Gronk are the receivers that know that stuff because they just have that it factor from a football IQ standpoint. So getting Gronk back is big. It's not like they struggled offensively in this game. But I do think, like, getting Antonio Brown back healthy, I've said this a couple times, but for them to make a real Super Bowl run, I do feel like Antonio Brown is very important for that to happen because I don't know if this defense is going to get back to elite ball, and I don't know if this offense as it exists right now can carry that against, they're gonna have a tough run in the NFC because it's not looking like they're getting the 1 seed at this point. It's still possible, but they're going to have to beat Dallas. They're going to have to beat the Rams, who I think heat back up. They're going to have to beat Arizona, Green Bay. Like, it's not going to be easy for them. So they're going to. I'm not worried about them, but I'm just pointing out the flaws that I'm seeing in their team. So the Rams at Green Bay. This was like the game of the week. Everyone had their eyes on this one, and really wasn't that good of a game. Green Bay just kind of was in control the whole time. Well, that's not necessarily true. It was good first quarter or so. And then in the second half, Green Bay just kind of pulled ahead. And, I think the main takeaway from this game is that Matthew Stafford is officially very concerning. The Rams went all in. They were like, we got our guy at quarterback now. We're going to trade for Von Miller. Like, we've already traded all of our first-round picks away to get Matthew Stafford. Like, this is it. This is our team. This is our window. And we've seen earlier on in the season, like, why they felt that way. Matthew Stafford was leading the MVP race, myself, applauding them, like, they hit on it. They got their guy. Like, yes. But now there's a lot of problems with Matthew Stafford. A lot of problems. And they've been the same problems for 3 weeks, going back to the Titans game. Now, he's playing banged up. Great. Not great, but it's the NFL. You're going to play banged up. Like, Tom Brady played on an MCL injury last year. Aaron Rodgers playing a broken toe. Like, if you are supposed to be that level quarterback, Patrick Mahomes fought through injury, I think, in 2019. Like, if you're supposed to be that level quarterback, those injury excuses just, they don't seem to keep you from accomplishing those things. Especially when with Stafford, it's stupid mistakes. It's making throws that you shouldn't make, turnover-worthy stuff. And it's like a lot of bad mechanics, funky footwork. And he's missing passes. He's missing like easy passes. He's missing drag routes to Odell Beckham. So it's inaccuracy and it's stupid mistakes that have made him look like Detroit Lions Matthew Stafford. And the hope was getting him out of Detroit, he wasn't going to go back to being that guy. But as people have said on Twitter, you can take Matthew Stafford off the Lions, but you can't take the Lions off of Matthew Stafford. That's kind of what we're seeing. Now, he's super talented. He's going to hit the lab. Hopefully he can get healthier and get back to what we saw earlier on in the season. But now Robert Woods is gone. They're very quickly trying to establish a rapport with Odell Beckham that I don't think is there yet. They did connect on a deep ball this week, which was promising. The offensive line hasn't been great. The run game is fine, but not like awe-inspiring. Now they might get Cam Akers back for the playoffs, which could be an X factor there because he was their best offensive player down the last month of last season. So you don't know if he's going to be fully healthy coming off the Achilles, I think it was, but it could be interesting. That Stafford has to play better. That's all it is. There's on the offensive side of the ball, at least. That's all it is. Now, there's also the defense has not been great. Raheem Morris, I like. I think he's doing a solid job there, but you got to keep in mind Raheem Morris has inherited Brandon Staley's defense, and that's not really Raheem Morris's background. So you're taking a guy and asking him to adapt a different coaching system, especially this system that is a cover 4 split safety defense. I've talked about this in the past, but if you're going to run quarters defense, communication is key. You have to understand what your leverage is on the play relative to the other players around you. And you have to understand your rules and your assignments more than a cover 3 system, more than a man system. Quarters is a complex set of rules, basically. You're passing guys off. You're coming downhill. It's not easy. We've seen William Jackson struggle at it earlier on in Washington. We've seen the Cleveland Browns with a really young secondary struggle earlier on in the season with quarters. Even the Green Bay Packers run this system. They weren't as good in the first month of the season as they've been. It takes time to kind of get the right chemistry with and communication with these defensive backs. And he's also doing it with a lot of young players, guys like Troy Hill, Taylor Rapp, Jordan Fuller. And that's a big ask for Raheem Morris to coach a system that isn't his. And I think you're seeing a lot of players not playing as fast as they did under Brandon Staley. Darius Williams has taken a complete 180. He's not been a good player for that defense. Did I say Troy Hill? I meant earlier. I meant David Long out of Michigan. He's a young corner. He's not having a great season. Fuller's really smart. Fuller's a good player, but the safeties haven't really come together. Their linebackers are really struggling in coverage. That didn't happen last year as much. So, I think Morris has done a decent job, but it hasn't been like a great job. And I think you can point to the fact that they wanted him to run a system that's not his, and he's not as good at communicating those rules and all the integral, details is really what it comes down to. So that's an issue for the Rams defense. And they're, for my power rankings, I took them out of my top tier because their offense has really got some warts right now, and they're not an elite defense, even though they have Aaron Donald and they have Jalen Ramsey in there, right? So this to me was a lot more about the Rams maybe not being as good as we thought, as it was like, oh my God, the Packers blew out an amazing Rams Super Bowl team. Now, I don't want to take away from this win for Green Bay. I picked the Rams to win this game. I thought with the injuries for Green Bay, with Elton Jenkins out and Josh Nishman going against Von Miller, that Rodgers would be running for his life, with Aaron Donald going against, basically backups on the interior. I thought the Packers offense would struggle a lot more than they did. Rodgers was an MVP in this game, frankly. That people don't want to put Rodgers in the MVP conversation, probably because he won it last year and he's created all this off-field drama. Reality is Rodgers is the best quarterback in the NFL right now. And you look at this game against Minnesota, like he is playing like last year's MVP Rodgers now. Like maybe the first 6 weeks of the season, not really. But he has heated up. He's playing really good football on a broken toe, which I don't think is that big of a deal. I think he's kind of, overselling it. Doesn't seem to be slowing him down that much. He may be a little bit less twitchy as a runner, but like his accuracy has been phenomenal. He's dropping dimes these last few weeks deep down the field, looking like vintage Rodgers. So there was a lot of drives in this game where he really stepped up. They needed a drive, and he put multiple beautiful long drives together. A.J. Dillon is emerging as a super impact player, as a runner. And he fights for tough yardage. He does what he does. If you're going to invest in a running back, he does what you want that guy to do. He creates yardage that isn't there. He pushes piles. He runs through arm tackles. He's been surprisingly great in the receiving game. Marquez Valdes-Scantling, knock on wood, has grown a pair of hands, and now that that's happened, he's been a good number 2 receiver besides Devontae Adams, which this team is desperately needed. Randall Cobb in this game looked faster than I think I've ever seen him look. I know he hurt his groin. Hopefully with the bye week, he can get healthy. But, getting David Bakhtiari back, that's an offense, man. Even though Elton Jenkins is out, you got the best receiver in football. You got 2 running backs. Aaron Jones was a non-factor in this game. He was playing injured. But hopefully an average offensive line, one of the 3 best running back duos in the NFL, and a good receiving core with Adams, MVS, Cobb. You can work with that, especially when the defense is playing like this. How many times do I have to say Rashawn Gary is one of the most slept-on players in the NFL? He's slept on in the draft, slept on now. The defense with him is just so much better. He has so many impactful sacks. He's in the top 10 in pressures in the NFL. He's a monster. They have not missed a beat with Za'Darius Smith out because Rashawn Gary is doing what he's doing. Kenny Clark, also underrated. They can rush the passer. They have a great secondary. They have a really good linebacker. They're one of the best defenses in the NFL. So, Green Bay, statement win for them as well. A bye week was needed. But I think that hasn't changed as much. We kind of knew that about Green Bay. Whereas the Rams, it's yikes. So those are the games I wanted to really hone in on. I'm going to do just speed round here for the rest of these games. And it's just, it's nothing against these teams. It's just I didn't really have takeaways from them. And we're going to be doing studs and duds this week for every team. So I don't really need to spend too much time on the players that stood out for me because that's going to come on Friday with studs and duds. So we got Bears-Detroit, kind of went as expected. Dalton wasn't bad, but not great. Detroit stays Detroit. They lose another close game, which isn't bad for them. Dan Campbell probably in tears again. Nothing really changing here. The Bears especially they're just in one of the worst situations in the NFL because you got Khalil Mack coming off a serious injury at 30 years old. The defense is fine, but I don't think they're going to be an elite defense for the next 2 or 3 years. And then you're basically rolling out Justin Fields, hoping that the rest of these guys can come together. Now, Mooney looks good. We'll see what happens with Allen Robinson. Tevin Jenkins, they got to get him healthy. It's not all bad. They have some talent there. David Montgomery has been super explosive, so it's not all bad. They have some pieces there. But they need to find a coach and an identity. They just have a lot of work to do. Then we have Las Vegas at Dallas. This is a really exciting game. You could spend a lot of time on this one. This was an entertaining circus show, really. I don't remember ever seeing that many penalties in a game. As far as the outcome, I don't have a significant takeaway from this one because the refs had such a stronghold on this one. Now, it was pretty back and forth. They were throwing flags on both sides, so I'm not going to say Dallas got lucky or the Raiders got lucky. I thought both quarterbacks played really well in this game. I think Dallas, obviously, without their top 2 receivers, is going to be better than this offensively because they did struggle in the first half. But I didn't have a lot of takeaways from that game other than wow, I was entertained and tired of listening to the Stripes hit the microphone every 3 plays. Buffalo at New Orleans, again, not much to take away. The Saints' offense is just in complete shambles. Credit to the Bills' defense. They're a well-rounded unit. They lost Tre'Davious White, which sucks so much. I think it takes the ceiling off of that defense a little bit. Curious to see how they protect Levi Wallace, and it's probably going to be the Pittsburgh kid. Now that I think about it, can't think of his name off the top of my head. I can picture him. I'm going to look this up because I am now very intrigued. What's his name? I'm kind of sad I couldn't draw this one because I liked the pick on day 3 when they made it. Oh, Dane Jackson. I thought of it just before it showed up. 7th round pick in 2020. Instinctive, fun player, and he'll probably, I guess they're listing Cam Lewis on Our Lads. I'd like to see Dane Jackson and what he can do stepping up at corner for them. So we'll see what they can do. They're well coached. A huge loss for them. But yeah, Saints season's probably done. 7 seed is still up for grabs. Maybe Taysom Hill figures it out on his another weird contract. But yeah, again, not many takeaways in this game. You can't give Josh Allen that many opportunities. Atlanta at Jacksonville, just more of the same for both sides. From Atlanta, it's like not very explosive offensively. They were fine. Why aren't you using Kyle Pitts? Matt Ryan, the famous missed check down by 5 yards. I think it slipped out of his hands, but there's nothing impressive to say about Atlanta in this game other than A.J. Terrell is still really good. Good job. You beat a Jags team that has no idea what they're doing on offense. And again, why is Urban Meyer still there? This is... If he's back next year, it's honestly going to piss me off. And I have no emotional connection to the Jaguars. But I've said it before, and I'll say it again. I hate when teams, from an organizational standpoint, just do stupid shit. And I thought the Urban Meyer hiring from the get-go was suspect. I didn't really get how he fit in the NFL, how he fit as this, guru mentor for a young quarterback. I thought there were multiple better options for that. And we're seeing they have no innovation, no functional innovation. Yeah, they run jet sweeps to Jamal Agnew. Where is that gonna get you other than the occasional explosive play? They don't do things to make things easy on Trevor Lawrence. For one, their run game's a disaster. They still, to me, this is not an official analytic, but they lead the league in snap the ball to terrible blocking plays in the NFL where just the run schemes are just broken. They don't function against the formations that they're calling these runs against. They have so many just unblocked defenders lurking around in the backfield on their runs. It's been noticeable from the first game of the season. It hasn't really improved. And just schematically, granted their receivers are not great right now. Marvin Jones, beautiful one-hand catch in this game, by the way, but mostly hasn't been anything other than a decent number 2. Obviously, DJ Chark getting hurt hurts their offense. They had plans for Travis Etienne, but still, their offense sucks, and Trevor Lawrence sucks. But it's not his fault. They just don't help him at all. It's so frustrating. So if he's back next year, I'm going to be mad. I'm going to be mad because there's so many better options than washed up, cheating ass Urban Meyer. Why? Why is he still here? Let alone why are they still supporting him and gonna bring him back next year? He's not a leader. He's not a schemer. And he's sure as hell is not a personnel guy. So what is he doing here? It just makes me mad. All right. Philly at the New York Giants. What do you want me to say about the Giants? There's just nothing that hasn't been said. The offense, you can take Jason Garrett out of here. It's still the same old Giants. Jones can make some nice throws. They can't run the ball. Saquon sprung free once this game. That was fun. And defensively, I like Patrick Graham. I like their defense. I have no problem with their defense, but you need to score points in the NFL. they escaped with a win in this game because Jalen Hurts was ugly as a passer and Jalen Reagor basically choked at the end of the game. I will take a moment to take a victory lap on Jalen Reagor. I was about as low as anybody pre-draft on Jalen Reagor. He was my number... Let's just pull this up. That'd be the 20... Should be able to find this pretty quick here. That'd be the 2019 NFL draft, right? 2020 NFL? Should be 2020 draft board. Is this the right class? Yeah. So I had Jalen Reagor as a 3rd to a 4th round grade as my number 15 receiver in that class. I think I gave the pick about a D, maybe a C- for the Eagles because I understood they wanted speed, but let's see, what did I write about Jalen Reagor? Absolutely rare speed, but Reagor is a bit raw as far as his receiver skill set is considered, declaring after a down year of production in his junior season, where a lot of his production came in the return game. He has lots of upside as a top deep threat in the NFL, but needs to improve his hands, where drops have been an underlying issue with Reagor. Case in point, the end of this game, they weren't necessarily drops, but it was like ball skills bad for Jalen Reagor. Hurts actually was really good on that game-winning drive. He took a couple checkdowns to one of my dudes, Kenneth Gainwell, and then made some really nice throws. Like, Hurts was bad in that game, but the game-winning drive, like, he should have pulled that off. Like, he was clutch, but Jalen Reagor let him down. Reagor created about a half a step of separation on a go ball on the outside. Hurts dropped it, like, right in here, but Reagor turned around late for the ball, bounced off his face. It then got deflected and almost intercepted. And then like 2 plays later, Hurts kind of drops a dime right on like the 1 yard line with like 15 seconds left. They're down by 6. Granted, if Jalen Hurts throws a ball away before half, they kick a field goal. They're only down by 3 in that situation. The entire game would have changed. But, again, Hurts was good on that drive. He puts a really nice ball over the middle of the field. Reagor had to jump up and kind of attack it, but he had plenty of time to get his hands on the ball, absorb the hit from behind, because at that point he's a defenseless receiver. He's either going to get a penalty or the guy can't hit him that hard. And the ball just went right through his hands. So, like, he just doesn't have ball skills, which really bothered me about Reagor. But I also said he will also need to develop his release and all-around route running, as his role at TCU as a deep threat, return man, and gimmick playmaker. Like, he just was a limited player. Reagor inspires confidence in his ability to develop as a deep threat by showing leaping ability, making up for a lack of height when he doesn't separate or when the throw is behind him. So I was saying, like, at least he can jump, which should help his ability on contested situations, which he's shown. He's shown some amazing catches, but yeah, a 3rd to a 4th round grade on him. They took him in the 1st round ahead of Justin Jefferson. Like, it's officially time to take my victory lap if it wasn't already on not liking that pick at all. So yeah, that's the Eagles-Giants game. Ugly game. Tennessee at New England. I've made my point about Tennessee over the last few weeks. I had a Ryan Tannehill segment on the podcast last week. Everything I said about that, I think, applied in this game. He was fine, but he wasn't, like, spectacular, or he didn't do enough, which is my thing with Ryan Tannehill. And they're just so banged up at this point. Like, I don't want to bang on the Titans. At this point, it's just like they need to hold on, win a couple more games until they can get these guys back, because they're an incredibly top-heavy, star-driven offense. This game was closer than it looked. There was some fumbles from Tennessee from these backup running backs. Defense still played pretty well in this game. Well, it didn't play great, but Titans need to get healthy. Patriots had a great team win. I didn't have these big takeaways, and that's not a huge surprise. I think a lot of Patriots fans were like looking at a lot of power rankings out there that had the Titans ranked 3rd. And they're like, look, we beat the 3rd best team in the NFL. No, Titans are not the 3rd best team in the NFL right now. They're just not. To me, right now, they're closer to the bottom half of the league than they are the top half of the league. Chargers at Broncos. Again, we'll have at this point talked to the Chargers guys. Guilty as charged about the Chargers side of this game, but my general opinion is the Chargers offensively, they need to do the easy stuff much better, and part of that is Herbert. He's not bad in the quick game, but I think he does think just a little bit slow at this point. Needs to speed up some of his decision making, but it's not really his fault. I think their screen game needs to be more active. Like, they just don't do enough of it, honestly. Their run game isn't very good. Like, the Chargers, you know what they kind of remind me of is the Seattle Seahawks offense, where they're like really dependent on those big chunk plays. But the more, they're better in the quick game. I think Herbert's actually better in the quick game than Russ right now. And their offense is more catered to that stuff. But they're very one-dimensional offensively. They totally rely on Herbert's genuinely elite ability to hit back shoulders to Mike Williams, to have those like beautiful balls that just hang in the air forever, deep outs to Keenan Allen, like deep outside the numbers and over the top of the defense. That's where they thrive. But it's the run game and the short to intermediate game that I think is lacking, and that leads to a lot of inconsistency because as good as Herbert is at hitting those deep balls, it's just a very high variance part of football. So they need to have a better foundation to their offense, and that comes back. It's not just Herbert; it's playmakers, it's the play caller as well. So they got a lot to clean up offensively, honestly, and their defense just has holes. I think you love the star talent they have, Bosa and Derwin James, but there's no way around it. They have holes. You can run on this team for one, and you can attack their secondary, really. So they have a lot of work to do. I don't think they're quite ready. I think they're maybe a year ahead of their time. I think they need a little more depth next year throughout the roster, not just depth, but like quality starters scattered throughout. And they need more of an identity offensively other than Herbert can drop dimes outside the numbers, deep and outside the numbers. So I'm not like, I had the Chargers at 9-8-1 this year was my prediction. So like they're kind of on par with how I expected. I didn't think they would be dominant this year. I thought they'd have some ups and downs, and this game clearly had some ups and downs. They struggled offensively in this game. And then we got Minnesota at San Francisco. It was a fun game. It spoke for itself. The Niners are playing really good offensively. The Vikings are playing really good offensively. But I didn't have any like takeaways. I wasn't terribly surprised by how this game played out. Debo is unbelievable. Like, Debo might be a top 5 running back in the NFL who's also a good receiver. I love how Shanahan, like, it's just funny how things, like, come around. You look at Atlanta, who let Kyle Shanahan leave. They regret that decision, so they hire Arthur Smith, who's kind of he's in that Shanahan tree of, like, wide zone, play-action offenses. So they go back to their roots. They can't have Kyle Shanahan, but they can have Arthur Smith. So Arthur Smith says, look, I'm going to take Cordarrelle Patterson, who's just this freaky receiver with the ball in his hands. I'm going to stick him at running back. And then Kyle Shanahan's like, hey, I see you, Atlanta. I see you trying to be me. I'm going to be you. So he puts Debo in a running back. I love how, like, consistently you see teams, like, inside the same skill trees. Or not skill trees, scheme trees. Like, doing the same stuff, and I think it's fun. And then the last game is Cleveland at Baltimore. Like, this game felt like a game from the 1960s. Like, both quarterbacks were bad in this game. I actually thought Baker was better than Lamar in this game. Lamar really, he had the running, which he always brings to the table, and then he had like 2 throws. Was that to come out in the second half? I think it was. He had like 2 throws. One was like basically a F-it, like, arm punt that Mark Andrews made an amazing one-handed catch on. And then he had that spectacular throw where he was backing up. Myles Garrett closing in on him, and he hit Mark Andrews in the end zone. Like 2 really good plays from Lamar, and then kind of a bunch of garbage as a passer, honestly. Bad mistakes, interceptions, inaccurate throws. He was really bad for the majority of this game. Now, his defense kind of carried him in this one, honestly. I mean, Lamar's been doing his fair share of carrying that team, but in this game script, it was like both sides were like, who's going to run the ball better? Because neither of us can throw the ball, and we need our defense to close up gaps in a hurry and rush the passer and create turnovers, and ultimately the Ravens did a better job of that. Because Baker, I thought, made some better throws than Lamar in this game. They couldn't finish drives, and they turned the ball over themselves, and it was just kind of an ugly old school game. I felt like it's good to know that Baltimore is capable of doing that against more physical teams. But I wasn't like impressed by them necessarily. I was worried about the offense, but impressed by the defense. So there's some trade-off there. And then Cleveland, it's kind of the same deal. Like, Baker's not great. He didn't have a great game. He made some good throws, though, and receivers were dropping balls. Looks like they lost Jack Conklin in this game, which is going to hurt that offensive line. Their defense is really good. I put them on this list because I didn't have a lot of takeaways from this game, basically. Like, these teams are kind of moving on, I guess. I don't know. We got the mailbag now to wrap up the show. So, again, guys, patreon.com/thatfranchiseguy. Shout out to all my amazing patrons. This channel would not exist without you, so thank you for your support. And if you guys want to submit questions to the show, you can head over to patreon.com/thatfranchiseguy. Sign up, go into the DMs there, lead with mailbag question, and I'll read your question on the show here. So here we go. This is from LaDuca, and it's actually not a question, but how's it going, John? Appreciate your support, man. I'll try and get back to that message, but anyway, from Chase, what is the best, coolest NFL name? My pick is Divine Diablo. I'll go with your pick, man. Divine Diablo. It's just like, you got the devil and you got the divine. It's like their parents were like, well, if our last name's got to be Diablo, we might as well balance it out with our Lord and Savior. REA Beats. What is Taysom Hill's role for the Saints, and can you justify him paying that much? The Taysom Hill contract thing, I tweeted about this, but you cannot convince me that that is not some sort of money laundering, salary cap magic that Mickey Loomis somehow found some glitch in the system. I am not smart enough to tell you what, but I can tell you that paying Taysom Hill, who has 5 starts at quarterback in the NFL and hasn't been particularly good, he's a third-string H-back and a backup quarterback, there is no logic to paying him $80 million or whatever it is, 20 guaranteed, something crazy. There is nothing you can say to convince me that that is not some loophole in the salary cap that they are abusing to create cap space. I mean, the Saints made $95 million in cap deficit magically disappear. And no, releasing Quan Alexander to then re-sign him and releasing Emmanuel Sanders and who was Janoris Jenkins. No, that can't explain how they made $95 million in salary cap disappear. It's unbelievable what they do with the cap, and I am fully convinced that Taysom Hill's weird-ass contracts are a huge part of that. It's like they're in cahoots with each other. It's like, Sean Payton's like, I'll keep talking you up as Steve Young and act like you're a relevant quarterback on this team if you agree to do this shady shit with the salary cap. And he's like, yeah, that sounds good. Works for me. From Honk Boy, could Kirk Cousins sneak his way into the MVP race? There's a lot of comments from my Pro Bowl voting video about Kirk Cousins not even getting a Pro Bowl vote from me. I go back and forth on this because I think Kirk Cousins does have this kind of unfair stigma about him. Like, you know, he's the modern Andy Dalton line. He is the 16th best quarterback in the NFL, and I do believe that. But he outperforms that, and he has outperformed that for 2 years now. And it's kind of the same thing like Tannehill's dealing with. Like, at what point does that switch? And you're not the 16th best quarterback in the NFL. You're actually the 8th best quarterback in the NFL, or you are actually an MVP candidate. And it's like, it's tough because Kirk does some really good stuff, but he's not when I watch Kirk Cousins, like, he's not an MVP. He doesn't make amazing plays. He has good confidence and good accuracy and amazing receivers. But he's made some really good throws under pressure and having a really good season. I think to say he deserves Pro Bowl votes is fair. But I don't know. His team is, obviously with MVP, you need to be a good team. His team is what, 6-7 right now, or 5-6, or 6-6. They're fine. They're scraping by. He's had some stinker weeks. I mean, ultimately, no. I don't think he can get the votes to win MVP. I don't think anybody in their right mind is going to be like, yeah, Kirk Cousins was the best player in the NFL this year. He's a good player. He's having a great year. But I just think MVP is just, it's tough, man, because he's playing as good as any quarterback throughout the season, but who in their right mind is going to vote for him? I'm not. Okay, from BMO Grim, the center position is an often overlooked position in the NFL. Who are your top 5 centers in the league right now? Good question. I think Corey Linsley was last year the best center, and he's been probably the best center this year. I don't want to overlook or forget anybody here, but you know, I think Jason Kelce, is still in the top 5. I wouldn't put him number 2 necessarily, but he's been outstanding. I'm just kind of going through division in my mind. Oh, Frank Ragnow, he was on track to kind of take the number 1 center. He's been hurt most of the season. So Frank Ragnow, Corey Linsley are 1A, 1B. I think Jason Kelce's still in that conversation. So I'm just kind of going division by division here. NFC West, Cowboys, no. Eagles, we got Kelce. Giants, no. And Washington. Rolier's good, but he's not top 5. So then NFC South, Ryan Jensen will put on the back burner. I'm a little lower on him than some. You know, he is a mauler in the run game. He has his issues in pass protection, but he's up there. He's really good. Eric McCoy's good, but he's not top 5 for the Saints. So that's that. Out west, I don't think I'd put Rodney Hudson in the top 5 anymore. He had a down year in 2020 for the Raiders, and he hasn't been elite for the Cardinals. He's changed their offensive line because he's just like so experienced and he's good at blitz recognition and stuff, but he himself, blocking-wise, hasn't been top 5. So out west, you don't have any, so right now we got Corey Linsley, Ragnow, Jason Kelce. Onto the AFC North, there's J.C. Treader's up there. He's kind of close to Ryan Jensen. AFC East, David Andrews is in that same group right there. AFC South, Ryan Kelly is definitely in the top. I would put Ryan Kelly in the top 5. He'd probably be 4th behind those 3 guys we just mentioned. Ben Jones is good for Tennessee, but probably not top 5. Titans. Oh, Jags. What's his name for the Jags? Not Shredder. Oh, Linder. He's really good. Brandon Linder. He's really, really slept on. I think I'd put him in there ahead of Jensen. And then out west, I mean, Creed Humphrey, man. Creed Humphrey, I'm probably not ready to do it yet, but he's really freaking good. He's top 10 already. Raiders, no. Broncos, no. So my top 5, thanks for bearing with me. I would go Frank Ragnow, Corey Linsley. This is in order. Frank Ragnow, Corey Linsley. We got Jason Kelsey, Ryan Kelly, and then Brandon Linder for the Jags. That's my official top 5. We just got through the whole league. All right, from Alex, can you explain why the Patriots are not Super Bowl favorites yet, or if you think they are, tell me why? I think just in general, offensive explosiveness and consistency is a concern. That's really what it comes down to. I mean, they're heading into the playoffs with one of the best defenses, so that gives them a chance. And they're in a conference that is very winnable, so that helps them. But you have a rookie quarterback who's never played in the playoffs, obviously. And they don't have a lot of explosiveness to their offense. So it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough to stack together wins against the Chiefs and the Bengals and really good offenses, right? Okay, from Nicholas Craig. Have your thoughts changed about the Packers free agency and draft considering how things have played out? So my criticisms about the Packers offseason were well before they signed Devondre Campbell, which I thought was a smart little pickup. I had no idea he'd be this good, but I was fine. I thought that was a good move. It was signing a veteran that they never do. Rasul Douglas was like, cool. Why not add more veteran talent? Those have been the two moves of their offseason. Even signing Whitney Merciless was good for a little bit there. Those are the moves that reshaped their offseason. Now, the one thing I would say my thoughts have changed on is that Eric Stokes is a better player now than I ever thought he would be. And I didn't hate Eric Stokes, but I really like Asante Samuel. And I don't think that's a huge trade-off. I think you'd be very happy with Asante Samuel based on what he's done for the Chargers, but you're pretty happy with Eric Stokes too. So I think that's the one thing that's changed is that pick's fine. Good pick. Eric Stokes. I'll tip my cap to Gutekunst. He's a little better than I thought he was. I had a early second rounder on Stokes. That was more about I really liked Asante Samuel. And I don't know who I'd rather have at this point. I think they're both really good. But my main criticisms about Green Bay was how the whole from drafting A.J. Dillon in the second round to then paying Aaron Jones instead of Corey Linsley, and then with your next second-round pick drafting Josh Myers over Creed Humphrey. That whole exchange pissed me off to no end, and I still think that was a terrible execution. There were so many other things they could have done with those three assets that would have made so much more sense and made the offense even better than it is right now. You could have not drafted A.J. Dillon and paid Aaron Jones. I'm not saying that's what I would have done, but I think that would have been a better outcome because then you're spending that second-round pick on an impactful receiver. You could have drafted A.J. Dillon, which honestly in a vacuum I said at the time I'm fine with A.J. Dillon in the second round. I had a more of a third, fourth round guy, but I liked A.J. Dillon much more than a lot of people. So if you draft him, I think I said in my draft grades video, the one saving grace of this pick is that A.J. Dillon could be Derrick Henry-esque and make it so you don't have to pay Aaron Jones. But then they paid Aaron Jones. Why? A.J. Dillon's probably better than Aaron Jones now. He kind of is. He's been a better running back than him this year, both in the running game and in the receiving game. So if instead of paying Aaron Jones, you could have either used that money on Corey Linsley or let him go use that money in free agency on Casey Hayward, who I was screaming for, or a receiver. I was saying Will Fuller. Granted, he got hurt. Could have used that money on a receiver. And then in the second round, if you let Lindsley go, which honestly I would have much rather paid Corey Lindsley over Aaron Jones, if you're following all of this. And then that's your re-signing. You don't need to get into free agency. That's kind of what I said priority number one should have been, was paying Corey Lindsley, and they let him go. But then they draft Josh Myers over Creed Humphrey. What was that pick? That pick was so dumb. Creed Humphrey was so clearly a better prospect. So I still think they made some really stupid mistakes. Now, LaFleur's awesome, Rodgers is awesome, Stokes is awesome. They've made some good free agency pickups. Not everything they do is terrible, but they could have really stacked up they could have seriously some combination of A.J. Dillon blocked by Corey Lindsley and then a second-round pick on, I don't know, a receiver or something else. I don't know, another defensive tackle, something else with that second-round pick. Or they could have had A.J. Dillon blocked by Creed Humphrey and then a free agent receiver, call it. You know, the free agent receivers haven't worked out to the best that I thought they would, but you don't know if it looks different if they're in Green Bay. You don't know what Kenny Golladay looks like if he's in Green Bay, or you don't know what Will Fuller looks like if he stays healthy in Green Bay. It could be different. You don't know. But I still think that whole exchange and my criticisms of their offseason have held up, other than Eric Stokes being a little better than I thought he would be. But I still think Asante Samuel was the obvious pick at the time. And he's been really good. And again, you don't know what he looks like in Green Bay, where they've done a really good job with these corners. So I don't know. They've impressed me in other ways, like identifying Rasul Douglas, hats off. Identifying Devondre Campbell, hats off. I wasn't critical of those moves, but the things I was critical of, I think, have held up pretty well. All right, from Adam. Just wanted your opinion. The Rams are going through the same slump the Chiefs were going through weeks ago. The Rams might just need a game in which they can beat up a weaker team like the Chiefs beat up the Giants to get their mojo back. Yes and no. The Chiefs have such a breadth of experience to draw on. I think Mahomes is a better player than Stafford, obviously. Whereas the Rams, it's more about honestly, I think it's more about learning what they are built to do. Like the Chiefs know what they can do at a high level. They've done it for so long. They just needed to get back in that groove. Whereas I agree to some points that you're making, like the turnovers, especially the missed throws, that is reminiscent for sure. I think Stafford needs to get his mojo back, but I don't think it's quite as simple as that. I think the Rams still have a lot of team building to do that the Chiefs didn't necessarily have to do. From Tanner, as of recent, we have seen the position of fullback and running back phase out. What other positions could be phased out / less important in the future? Maybe linebacker. I have talked about how linebacker is becoming less important because it's so damn hard to play. These offenses just expose that position group. They manipulate those guys, and it's just so difficult. That's why I'm usually not too hard on linebackers when they're out of position and they give up big plays, because it's damn hard. But the guys that do it well, like Kendricks and Warner, Wagner, they really stand out and make a difference. But there's just Levante David, there's just so few of those guys. Yeah, I mean, linebacker definitely comes to mind. You also got to look at league trends, and right now, these quarters defenses are in. And I don't think you need elite corners to play quarters. You need smart guys. Rasul Douglas, good example. Darius Williams, good example. Another guy in San Francisco is Oh, gosh. Mosley. I think in a quarters defense, which is such a trend, I don't think you need necessarily elite, like man-to-man corners. You just need smart guys that understand their role with some good quickness. So for those teams, I could see them putting less of a premium on corner than it's been for the last few years. From Jake, do you see a world where the Colts go on a deep playoff run this year? I don't. You know, they're not going to have they're not going to get the 1 seed, which is going to hurt them. They're a very steady team, but the odds of them just, because, you know, this is the analogy I would use, and sorry for the audio folk, but I'm holding my 2 hands up. You know, the Colts are going to ride a very even line, and there's just other teams in the AFC, the Chiefs, the Titans, the Bengals, the Ravens. There's just other teams that their highs are going to just be way above what the Colts can match. But their lows are going to be lower. So, like, the Colts can play spoiler for that reason. If a team comes out and doesn't bring it, the Colts will be better. But the odds are, if they have to win 3 straight games to get to the Super Bowl, the odds are in one of those 3 games, whether it's the first or the third, you're going to get the Chiefs blowing up offensively or Lamar going off or whatever it may be. And it's just a level that I don't think the Colts can match. I don't think Wentz can match it. I don't think their receiving game can match it. And I frankly don't think their defense can hang with an offense that's firing on all cylinders. Their defense is very steady, but they don't have an elite pass rush and they don't have elite cover guys. So their ceiling just isn't there. I really like the Colts, and I like a lot of the things they're building. I think Isaiah Rodgers at corner could be a really intriguing hit someday. Kwity Paye looks like a hit. I think Carson Wentz can be the quarterback there for a long time. The more and more he gets familiar with that scheme, I think Pittman's a really good number 2. They need an alpha receiver on that team. But that's what I've talked about with the Colts, is finding superstars at superstar positions, because they got a linebacker, they got a defensive tackle, they got a guard, they need an edge rusher, they need a receiver, they need a corner, they need a quarterback. They're building towards it, but they're not there yet. I do love Frank Reich, though. Last question from Vedant. What do you think about Aaron Rodgers to Cleveland? I'm a huge Browns fan. Feel like the blame shouldn't be all on Baker, but I personally think Cleveland would be a great destination for Rodgers. I'm just not sure he'll agree with how the receiver room is. Yeah, I just, in my mind, as someone that's followed Rodgers as closely as I have, I think he wants to go out west, man. I think he wants to be close to Hollywood with Shailene. I think he wants the spotlight on him. I think he's a West Coast guy. That's if he decides he wants to leave Green Bay, which at this point I think is wavering. I really do. I think that, I do think Green Bay has made enough changes, philosophically speaking, in the direction of what he's asked for, that he realizes his best chance to win is in Green Bay, and I think it is. I think chances are definitely better in Green Bay than Cleveland. I think Denver is a good spot, but it's not better than Green Bay right now. I think the whole Aaron Rodgers is gone narrative is cooling off. I think Jordan Love has shown that he needs more time. I don't think Green Bay is in a rush to roll Jordan Love out there. I think Jordan Love himself, he's a patient, calm dude. I think he'll be fine with another year as long as they're winning. So I really think Cleveland's pretty low on the list, honestly. Now, if he were to leave, it could work you know, maybe the Packers take on Baker in his 5th-year deal and you go with him and Love and just kind of let them battle it out. But I don't personally see it happening. It wouldn't be a bad fit. You could hopefully attract maybe Devontae Adams to come join him or something. That would be really interesting. But yeah, I just don't really see it, but be interesting, following LeBron's footsteps a little bit. And that is our mailbag. So I really hope you guys enjoyed the show. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate you guys taking the time, hearing out the podcast. This has been the Fully Inflated Football Podcast. I will see you guys actually on YouTube Thursday afternoon for my weekly picks are public this week. But again, those are every other week that isn't the first week of the month. Those are up on Patreon. It's patreon.com/thatfranchiseguy. If you want to support the show, you want to get exclusive content, go check that out. And yeah, we'll see you guys for the next one. Peace.